Just because Black Bay 58 came out in 2018 doesn't mean there is no history. And then, just because there is a new dial in blue doesn't mean it's a rip-off of the trend. 1954 brought the day for the world to see first diver watch by Tudor called Oyster Prince Submariner, reference 7922. 4 years later, Tudor released new model for Submariner, reference 7924 in 1958, a diver as reliable as Rolex with a dome plexi crystal to offer 200 meters of water resistance, yet sold at lower price point than Rolex. The original reference 7924 was made in 37mm case size, which would later be augmented to 39mm case in Tudor Submariner references. 50 years down the line, and we saw Black Bay 58 in the Heritage Collection. If during all this time you were wondering why is this watch called Black Bay 58 when the case size is 39mm, you know the reason now. If you find this video informative or helpful, please don't forget to support me by liking and sharing this video. I'm not funded or sponsored by basically anyone, and while it does limit my opportunities to access the watches for review, if I have your support, I promise I will continue to produce content and show details that you never saw before. As interesting as it sounds, Tudor Black Bay line, when introduced in 2012, was originally already focused on Tudor paying tribute to their rich history and long heritage, hence the name of the collection Black Bay Heritage. Now when you say heritage, what you're talking about is of course watches from the past, the vintage watches from back in the time when watches were made for function, and while they did add personality to the wearers, they were not ever sold as a luxury item or something you would consider as an investment. Back in the time, watches used to be smaller in their sizes and overall subtle in their form. And this is exactly what the original Tudor Heritage line missed out on, being not only thick but also bigger at 41mm case size. The original Black Bay 58, released in 2018, came in black color, and it was not only the case size which maintained its connection with the vintage reference, but it was also the thin case profile at under 12mm as opposed to 14.6mm on the 41mm references. Another very strong character that original black dial reference maintained was the gilt dial that not only made it very vintage inspired but also unique in the current market. Dome crystal was another character to link the watch back to history. Now with this release of 2020, we have a stunning blue dial, and if you're thinking that this is Tudor following marquee trends, the background is arguably beyond that. While the first Tudor Oyster Prince in 1969 came with black dial, the blue dial was added later in the same reference 7016. So this Tudor Black Bay 58 in blue dial pays tribute to the same blue Oyster Prince Submariner, although it of course doesn't come in the same snowflake dial. Talking about the dial, we have a beautiful blue dial here, and as much modern, flashy and vibrant it looks, it actually has striking resemblance with the shade of blue on the first Tudor Submariner too. So with Black Bay 58 in blue, on one hand you are getting a vibrant and striking blue color, on the other you have again a vibe of vintage watch from over 50 years ago. Amazing how one design character can sometimes meet two goals. The texture of the dial is also beautifully matte, and it is different than the texture you see on Tudor GMT Pepsi, which has a bit more rougher texture, while here you do have a matte texture, yet it is much smoother in its overall finish. This blue dial also marks a departure of gilt dial, and as much as it adds character to this blue dial reference on its own, it again aligns with the text color used on first Tudor Submariner blue dial that this watch pays homage to. The watch comes with snowflake hands to further maintain the resemblance, although the hour markers here are circular, similar to very original model from 1958, reference 7924. So there are many stories and past references that this new reference uncovers in a beautiful way. The bezel that the watch comes with maintains the shade of blue as the dial, and I love the aesthetics it adds. However, it being made of aluminum is my first disappointment. The bezel not being ceramic means that not only it will get scratched with day-to-day use, but it will also fade its color over time. Again, Tudor already have matte textured ceramic bezel on Pelagos, so it clearly wasn't something that they didn't know how to do. My second disappointment is that the bezel is not lumed, and let's discuss that further in the lume shot. The bezel action is consistent and crisp, although the coin edge teeth on the bezel are not the easiest ones to grip. The bezel action, although crisp, doesn't sound as tighter as it does on Rolex Submariner, and it probably is reflected in the price difference anyway. I will play two sounds of bezel action, one from this watch and other from Rolex Submariner, and which one belongs to this Tudor, I will let you make a guess. If you're thinking the first sound was much crispier, then you are correct, but that was from Rolex Submariner. I will discuss more differences between these watches in a few weeks' time, so let's wait until that time. The watch comes with a case that has polished sides and brushed top surfaces. The case tapers down at lugs, and you can see in this clip the watch is actually sitting on its lugs and not on its case back, meaning it will contour to the wrist without any gaps, which to me personally is a welcome design character. There's a polished beveling at the lugs, and that adds a bit of jewelry look to the watch, although it is a tool watch. The watch comes with screwed in crown, which has Tudor rose embossed on it. The watch comes with the lume that simply glamorizes the overall experience, and if I am to explain this lume in one word, it is beautiful. Thanks to no date, it is also very symmetrical too, which is a rare sight these days. The bezel is not lumed as you can't see the graduations now, but thanks to lumed pip, it is still fully usable even if you wanted to use it for professional activities. I left the watch for another 15 minutes in the dark to see the lume performance, and while the minute hand lost the lume brightness far more than the hour hand and markers, it is still legible, so overall I take it as a pass. Under the macro, the hour hand shows scratch marks, which is a bit disappointing given that this is not only a brand new watch but also a very new release too. The scratches are also not superficial, rather they seem deeper and are numerous. The minute hand comes with just a regular finish and surface smoothness is also average. There is also a high spot I can see which validates the basic polish work. The edges are rounded and you can see that there isn't much time spent in perfecting them, but this relatively aligns with the price of the watch. There's a minor surface flaw and deformity too at the bottom end that I can see, which isn't really what I was expecting. The seconds hand comes with dust particles on it, which are not visible to naked eye, and the joint overall isn't too bad, but it again isn't too fancy either. The hour markers come with similar finish as we see on the hands. However, there's a flaw or inconsistency I can see on one of the edges of the hour marker at 6 o'clock position, as if the internal edge is chipped away, which of course doesn't look good. The text is sharp with no issues or flaws on display, and similar is the case with the dial itself, which showcases very consistent finish and form. The text for Tudor and its logo also features great sharpness, and there are no issues of note. On the wrist, the 39mm Black Bay wears actually smaller than what you would expect from a 39mm diver watch. It is actually interesting to see Tudor releasing a diver watch with subtle and understated looks in the times when all other brands are mostly going only big. The watch lug to lug is 47mm and its lugs are relatively very thinner as well, so the overall heft and substance of the watch on the wrist is much more slender than you see with Rolex Submariner. My wrist size is 6.5 inches and span is 55mm, and I personally like bigger watches, so this Black Bay 58 although looks fine, but to me personally actually looks smaller for my liking. But it's meant to be a smaller watch, so no complaints there. As I stated earlier, the lugs taper down and you can see that the watch follows the wrist profile as if it shares the same contour, which of course helps with how elegantly it wears. The bracelet comes all brushed to complement the tool nature of the watch, and the brushing quality is overall just average. The bracelet links show rivets on the sides, which do receive some criticism, but I personally like them given the overall vintage vibe of the watch. The clasp is flip-lock safety clasp to offer protection, yet there is no quick length adjustments on the go, which is not ideal. There are, however, holes available for micro adjustments to get you the right fit from the bracelet links. In the times when watch manufacturers are going bigger and bolder with their watch design and profiles, Tudor is arguably the only mid-tier brand that has gone not just smaller in size but overall thinner and slender in profile and offer a vintage vibe. Where market is busy pleasing modern watch collectors, Tudor have stood out and gone to meet the needs of vintage watch collectors. And in result, we have a watch that is modern in its heart yet vintage in its looks. A watch that meets today's benchmarks for accuracy but vibe from the past. A watch that is pushing Tudor into the space where it's them and no one else. A space where if you have an appeal for vintage looking modern dive watch, you have only one road to take. Tudor Black Bay 58.